they need to
Yes.
know that not everything is spiritual. Some things are just medical, and I'm not asking anyone not to go to their holy book for solutions, but
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah.
I'm someone who believes that, I believe in God. I believe,
Sure, I do
Jesus
too.
as my,
Yes.
Lord and Savior. But I also believe that medicine was given as a gift to the world. And I
Absolutely.
believe that that knowledge comes from
Preach
God.
it.
And so,
100%.
so
Yes.
let God,
I,
let
I
God
think the
allow
Bible says,
medicine.
the Bible says that he that doesn't need, he who is not sick doesn't need a physician. Jesus said this in the Bible.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I'm like, let medicine work. Let it do its work. When my son first got diagnosed, I had people who said to me, don't worry, when you just use like some for the seizures, use some palm kernel oil or
Yeah.
whatever it was. I'm like, you know what? It took me a while to have this one child. I am not about to play roulette with this little man. I'm like, where the medicine at?
Yes.
Give it to him.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode. In today's episode, we're talking about supporting persons with special needs. And in today's conversation, I'm talking to the founder of Green Onyx Foundation, a foundation that supports children and families with special needs, and her name is Amaka. So, welcome to Unfiltered Real Talk, Amaka. So happy to have you here.
Thank you so much, IJ. I appreciate it. It's such an honor to be here with you today especially because I know the important strides you're making with this platform, and
Mhm.
it's really appreciated. Just thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. First off, how are you doing? I know you are over in the United States and we see a lot of numbers coming out of there about COVID. So I do want to ask you first how you're doing and how your family's doing.
Doing very well, actually.
Okay.
I started to shelter earlier than most people because I have, a pre-existing condition, as well as my son. And so I wasn't even,
Oh,
when things were not clear, I was not even trying
like
to
trying to mingle, expose yourself.
exactly.
Yeah, no,
I'm just like,
yeah.
do not come near me. I don't want to
And
see
don't
you.
come
I
to
don't
my
want to
house.
hear. Exactly. And so it's been a difficult past year, but thankfully I've kept quite well. I did come down sick sometime in January or so, but I'm really grateful that I had sort of
Much
done the
better.
work with taking meds,
Mm-hmm.
multivitamins or whatever,
Vitamins,
and just
so
keep
important. Yeah, yeah.
absolutely, and
Yeah.
just generally keeping well. So I'm grateful that that blew over pretty quickly.
Thank you. So I want to start out by asking you to tell us a little bit more about yourself and your foundation, Green Onyx, and why you started that foundation, why that name Green Onyx. So just tell us a little bit more about you and your foundation.
Awesome. My name is Wamaka Bakoba. I'm Nigerian Canadian. Went to school in the US. Lived in Canada for a number of years, and I've been in the US for a few months, but it's sort of between Canada and the US. I have a business background. I have a bachelor's in finance and an MBA in emerging markets
Oh,
finance.
wow.
So yeah, so disabilities, inclusion has not necessarily been what I've done most of my career. I have worked in international development quite a bit. So with the likes of the World Bank, DFID, programs that are funded by the Gates Foundation, those sorts of
Oh,
things.
wow.
And
Amazing.
I've worked in microfinance and risk management, which is kind of with the bottom of the pyramid. So I've always been plugged in to societal issues the way the most common of men typically live. I'm not typically plugged in with the 1% of the 1% at the upper echelon
Yes.
of
Yes.
um,
Yes.
society. So I've always been in the development space, community
Okay.
development, those kinds of things. But disabilities inclusion, which is what Green Onyx Foundation does, of which I'm founder, is more of a passion project for me. like I had mentioned earlier, I have a pre-existing condition which sort of came about in my adult years. I live with rheumatoid arthritis, and I
Oh,
usually say they're
wow.
wonky lungs, but that came about, the issues that I have with my lungs came about as an offshoot of rheumatoid arthritis. I have an only child. I'm a single mom. My son lives with mild cerebral palsy, and he also, as a result of that, has had seizures, which fortunately is well controlled. He also does have a cognitive disability. Um, Going back to
Okay.
about 2013, when I had moved home to Nigeria to work on a development project for a bit of time, that was kind of at the start of still trying to figure out a diagnosis for him, what was going on with him. And my experience as a mom in that time,
In
trying to
Nigeria,
say
I can only
exactly,
imagine.
like healthcare, honestly, was a nightmare. Trying to get him into school was a nightmare. And again, at that time, I didn't even have a formal diagnosis for him, but wherever we would go, I would mention these things.
Hmm.
So it was just such a nightmare for me. And that was also the start of my body kind of shutting down. And my experience with my own healthcare in Nigeria was not easy at all. Now, fast forward a couple of years, moving back to Canada, which is a lot more organized of a society,
Absolutely.
it still was not a straightforward journey for me. And one of the things about me, which can be a blessing and a curse, is that I'm typically very open about the issues that I'm going through. So, because of my openness, a lot of people would say, "Oh, you know what? I heard that you have this issue. Here is a resource. If you're looking for this, here is who you can contact." So, you know
Mm.
how we usually say in church back home, a closed mouth is a closed
It's
destiny. I
yes.
really I really do believe in that. I believe in openness. I believe in speaking up and speaking out your issues.
I
And
believe a
some,
problem shared is a problem solved, right? Or half solved at least.
absolutely, absolutely. And it was such a difficult journey for me, even moving back home to Canada, because I quickly realized that Nigeria
Okay.
could not. It was like playing roulette with my only child and eventually with my own health. So moving back to Canada really at that point was my only option. And so even being back home in Canada, it was still a very difficult journey. There is no toolkit, except you know somebody within that community and somebody who can guide you.
Yes.
There's really no toolkit that
Yes.
really helps a parent. Now let's leave my own health issues aside. There's no toolkit that helps the parent of a special need child sort of navigate it. There's organizations here and there, but even those, if you're not really looking out for them, then you might not see them. And so having gone through what I went through in the two spaces, I realized that, it's very difficult in Nigeria and then generally Africa, to navigate certain issues because of stigma, for one thing, a
Yes.
lack of services, um, just a lack of knowledge around certain things. And so I just, being that I had done a lot of development work, I kind of already was in that orientation and that mindset to
Mm-hmm.
constantly, be working in a developing society. And of course, Nigeria is home for me.
Yeah.
I'll even though I've lived out of Nigeria for the most part of my
Yeah, that's our
uh,
motherland.
yeah, that is home. It will always be home. That's where I was born. That's where I love. And just, I just thought, you know what, with what I have learned in my journey, I'm able to adapt it in a sense, and it's sort of handhold and help as I can within that space. Um, and then, fast forward, a few years, I started to do some of the things under the umbrella of MK Curvy, which is my fashion line. Again,
Yes.
um, economic development within the construct of fashion is what MK Curvy really is. But I quickly realized that I needed to kind of separate the two to have the most impact. And so I approached my co-founder, IJ, who is a special needs educator,
Okay.
because we had sort of talked and we did a few things informally together, raising funding for the space and all of that. And so I approached her and asked her if she would have an interest in coming together, to birth and grow Green Onyx Foundation. And so about a year
Wow.
ago, yeah, we joined forces, and IJ is a force of nature. Like I tell her, you know what? Whenever we go into a room, please just speak the letters behind your name. I'm like,
Yes.
CNN, BBC, whatever you do
Yes,
is
we
that,
need those kinds of people in our life. Like, wow.
she's amazing, and she's currently in a PhD program also around
Wow.
the same subject. Yes, and she has like 3 master's degrees.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
she,
Girl, the two of you
yeah,
combined is just like force.
so
Wow.
she's just an all-around amazing person, has a heart for the work, and so we came together where I was, about the business side and have the passion as a person who has gone through this. She has the skill set and the grounding to kind of move forward things that we're trying to do within the educational space. For instance, there's certain advocacy when you have worked within that sector and know what's workable and what's not workable, that you really need someone with her skill set for. So it's just been amazing for us to bring the lived experience and her background. And initially when we started, it was like, okay, should we kind of focus, because people always tell you focus on the one thing, so it was like, what would be our cause? Would it be
Mhm.
cerebral palsy because my son lives with it? Would it be autism because it's one of the ones that has, sort of been amplified a little bit more in the society? But we quickly realized that it's a space that, I mean, wherever in the world, you really should not look at disabilities with the one disability and focus on it, because
Absolutely.
if you sort of amplify the message for the one segment, there's a lot of things that kind of cut across, right? So you might have a mobility issue for one thing, and it could be maybe something with your hands and your legs, blah, blah, blah. But if you look at it from the approach of universal design, which is a design that essentially works for able people and
Mm.
people who are disabled, right? Then you don't necessarily have to tackle it for people who the arms might be, what's missing, or the legs might be missing, or,
Absolutely.
it could be a pregnant mom, which is not
Yeah,
really
some
categorized as
disabilities
a
are not
disability.
visible too, right? So, like you
Exactly,
said, it cuts
exactly,
across. So, I think
exactly,
that's an
exactly.
excellent approach.
Exactly. And so Green Onyx is more of trying to work within the environment to make it an enabling one that supports people who are living with disabilities in, mind, body, and spirit in a very holistic way. So today we might be working on, you know, um, giving a scholarship, for instance, to an educator to get the certification that they need to actually work at full capacity within the space. And tomorrow it might be a girl who is deaf, or hard of hearing, however you want to be termed. We're trying to help her get some funding to go to school, for instance. So the
Mm.
things that we do essentially vary. We're looking to also put out a lot of information. Back home, there's a lot of stigma. If you have an issue, it might be that uncle or that auntie in the village who, essentially went to dig under a tree for you. And, you
Yes.
know, it's this
Yes.
is, disabilities are not about what you have done, what your parents have done. it could happen to anyone at
Or
any
you're not
time.
loved by God and you need deliverance,
Absolutely.
Well, we're going to talk about some of
Absolutely.
those myths and debunk them if we
Absolutely.
can. You know,
Absolutely.
I did an episode a little while ago with a young lady who was hard of hearing
Mm-hmm.
and who is hard of hearing. Actually, she lives in Nigeria, and just her sharing her story around stigma and
Mm-hmm.
stereotype, bullying, discrimination, a lot of things that she faced,
Mm-hmm.
just really spoke to my heart, and as to why I thought, okay, I really need to do a mini series and just talk a bit more about other forms of disability, because
Mm-hmm.
you were so right that the issues cuts across all. It's not just about this one disability or this one that's being highlighted. It's just how
Absolutely.
can we support all persons with special needs to help them to reach their full potential, and that's what your organization is trying to do. So how do
Absolutely.
you guys get funding then? I know you said you're about a year old. So how do you get like funds to be able to support the causes that you want to accomplish?
So we have not been funded externally, quote unquote. We're
Externally,
in the
okay.
process. Yeah, we're in the process of filing for 501(c)(3) status, which is a charitable status. We are
Okay.
registered, but we're still in the process of that. And we wanted to hold off a little bit because we're still trying to build structure, build our programs in-house. In the past year, we've also been putting a board, an advisory board and a working board of directors together, so that, we kind of just take off as soon as we're registered with all of that. So back to your funding question, some of it has been self-funded. A
Wow.
lot of it has also been funded through a friends and family
Mm-hmm.
sort of model, right? So there's a project, for instance. So let's take an orphanage that we funded physiotherapy services for kids for a few months. I, between myself and IJ, we had funded a bit of it and then threw it open on social media and asked our friends and family to please pitch in and pay for
Yeah.
those services. So we had friends who picked up 1 or 2 months, et cetera, et cetera. We've also had
Is this
projects
the
where,
JK orphanage?
yes, yes.
Okay.
And and there's also been times where it's rent, for instance, that's the issue. So we've essentially said we're trying to raise this amount of money, go to friends and family as well. So their pockets have been our pockets for the last little while, and that's how we've done it. Now, what we've also done in that process is make the verified organizations that we're working with. We've either physically been there, seen what the operations are, or over time have asked for reports formally or
Yes.
informally from them. But we know that those structures work.
Okay.
We've sort of informally matched them with the donors who have given to us. So we will regularly have donors who have gone through us go to them and ask what their needs are. Like through the pandemic, for instance, there was the need for food for kids.
Yes.
There was the need for other supplies. We've
Mm.
had people go there and actually meet those needs because they know that these organizations work with us. And so it's sort of like an informal endorsement.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's been different ways of funding things. When a need has arisen, we've essentially tried to meet those needs in different ways.
Yeah.
But now we're trying to move to a model where we actually do get funding, which we now begin to allocate to different programs where,
I can see
um,
your finance background just coming in there and taking over. I see it. I can really see the strategic finance operation working in there. That's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. We're really trying to grow our impact
Yes,
because we do feel, and
absolutely.
again, some of the things that we're doing uh is try not to just hand out fish, but also teaching people working within the sector to fish as well. because it's easy to take money and, keep
Yes.
giving. But what are the things that we can actually do to enable the sector in ways, whether it be advocacy, whether it be building capacity within providers in the sector? Those are now things that we're looking at. So it's not, just giving, the relief in
Yeah,
terms of
and then
supplies, food,
absolutely,
exactly.
because then the person will have to still keep coming back if whatever you
Absolutely.
gave them runs out, then you're back again.
Ab-
But if you teach them a
Absolutely.
tool, a skill, then they can use that to develop themselves as well. So very quickly,
Absolutely.
can you tell us people, because you're telling us that you use sort of non-formal ways to gather funds. So if people want to
Mhm.
pitch in, they want to fund and support what you do, so can they go to your website, like Green Onyx? Can you tell us a bit about how can people contribute financially if they wanted to?
Absolutely. So right now, what we typically ask is go to our website, which is
Okay.
greenonyxfoundation.org. There's a place where you can contact us, and then we can sort of talk about what you want to do, because donors who come to us have different goals, really. Some want to work with us on an ongoing basis. Some just want to give, the one time. Others want to give not monetarily, but they want to,
Yes,
go, if they're on the ground, for instance, in Nigeria,
absolutely.
which is where we first started, then they want to give on an ongoing basis where, it could be there's need for a device, that helps kids to learn. They might want to just meet the need for that device. So there's different ways that people, can sort of get involved. And so we ask that you go to our website, shoot us an email. We're at greenonyxfoundation@gmail.com or info@greenonyxfoundation.org. You can reach us any of those ways, and then we can discuss. But hopefully within the next 6 months or so, we will have up on our website what the different projects are and a way to directly donate if you would rather not,
Okay, yeah.
necessarily interact so closely.
Thank you. So for those people that are on ground and maybe those who are not on ground, but they still want to know more, I want you to highlight, let's say, one or two of the top achievements that your organization has done now. So just highlight something that you feel like those who want to come help Green Onyx, they really need to know, and this might inspire them to do more.
In the last few months, I'm really proud of the videos that we've put out.
Okay.
So we've put out videos around disabilities in general. We've done one around Down syndrome. Through our social media platforms, we try to sort of disabuse and, put out snippets of information out there. So I think that one of the things that we've done, or I believe that one of the things that we've done, is start to get the conversation going, get
Going,
people to,
yes,
yes,
that's
get people to
huge.
be, yes, get people to see that, you know what, it's not a death sentence, and there are other people doing it out there. So we don't claim to be the only ones, but particularly with myself being a person who lives with disabilities and also has a child who lives with disabilities, I've had parents get in touch and say, even parents I didn't know had special needs kids, and we've been friends for a while. They get in touch and say, you know what, thank you so much for being so open.
Wow, that's,
Um,
that's amazing.
yeah, and someone like IJ who is, working within the educational space, it just gives the confidence when people who are working in the space come up to us to ask
That's the
for
sole
some,
reason why we're doing this thing. Even this podcast, I'm trying to raise this
yeah,
conversation. I'm titling the mini series "Hear Me Out." That's
yeah,
exactly it. Because when somebody hears you out, then they can relate with you better, and that's just it. That's the goal.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And it also helps that we're from there. It's not just,
Yes,
kind of bringing solutions. We understand the issues on the ground. We really do.
because we
And that's
live
why
it.
we,
Yes.
exactly. So that's why we take the approach of, on the one side, kind of working with educators and providers on the ground, like the educational sector, for instance, there's there's schools that want to take kids on who have special needs. The thing is, there aren't that many special needs educators within the system, for one thing. Other thing is, parents will come to the school and say, look, I don't want my child to be in the class with this person, as if the
Yes,
disability
we're
will
gonna
rub off
talk a
on
bit
them.
about that. Oh,
So they're caught between a rock and a hard place. But we're hoping that through the information that we continue to put out, the more you hear things, the more you see, because disability doesn't have a look. When people see me, most people don't know that I have a disability. When most people see my child, he's such a sociable, likable child. A lot of people will say, why do you keep saying that this boy has this thing? But it's a fact. It's not something that I can change, or anybody can change. I just believe it's what it is. And so when people start to see more people speak up who have the conditions or who are living with it, or people who are versed, who are from there, and we know that we can do certain things to make it better, I believe things will change. And quite frankly, in 2019 or so, the president signed into law a Disabilities Act or so. And again, that came from the work of people who
this is
live with
the
disabilities.
Nigerian president?
Yes.
Oh.
And this came about from people who live with disabilities doing some advocacy, but it's not enough. When you look at, like the ADA here in the United States, that also came about from people who live with disabilities being very vocal and doing sit-ins and all kinds of, protests. That's the only way change can come about. And we know what the issues are. We know there's hunger in the land. So we will do things like, where we can, provide what we, some sort of sustenance. But on the other hand, we still need to do those things to enable the environment to work for people who have disabilities.
Thank you. Speaking about enabling the environment and parenting, I want us to start to talk about that a little bit. As a parent, you're a mom to a person with special needs. You're African, you're Black, and I feel like sometimes African people, we are clueless, or maybe we just want to live in the dark. I don't know. This is harsh, but I have to keep it real. This is what we try to do here on the podcast. So bringing it down to Nigeria, I just feel like there's just no supports for persons with special needs. Zero, whether you have visible disability or you don't have a visible disability. And if you don't have a visible disability, then you don't have a disability. There are people who feel like, you don't have a problem because your leg is not like this, or your hand is not like this, or you're not blind, right? And you need to go, you're confessing negativity, like stop being that way. Pray it out. You pray better, you fast better, all these things will disappear. So I want us to start to talk about enabling environments, debunking some of these myths, and then helping our listeners and our viewers understand how we can better support persons with special needs in whatever capacity. Let's talk about, what you think, in your opinion and with your background, that we can do to help parents really support and create that enabling environment for your child who may have special needs, or maybe that adult person in your life who may have special needs.
Absolutely. I think specific to Nigeria, it's not always about pity or handouts or any of that. We also need to have people who are speaking truth and people who are speaking objectively, and even educating the parents, because sometimes the issues actually stem from the parents because they're not informed on what they should be looking out for instance, milestones with their kids. They need to know that not everything is spiritual. Some things are just medical, and I'm not asking anyone not to go to their holy book for solutions, but I'm someone who, I'm someone who believes that, I believe in God. I believe,
I do
Jesus
too.
as my, Lord and Savior. But I also believe that medicine was, given as a gift to the world. And I
Absolutely.
believe that that knowledge comes from
Preach
God.
it.
And so,
100%.
so
Yes.
let God, let
I
God
think the
allow
Bible says,
medicine.
the Bible says that he that doesn't need, he who is not sick doesn't need a physician. Jesus said this in the Bible,
Absolutely.
and I'm a person of faith too, but
Yeah.
I'm with you on this one.
Absolutely. And so I'm like, let medicine work. Let it do its work. When my son first got diagnosed, I had people who said to me, don't worry, when you just use like some for the seizures, use some palm kernel oil or
Yeah.
whatever it was. I'm like, you know what? It took me a while to have this one child. I am not about to play roulette with this little man. I'm like, where the medicine at?
Yes.
Give it to him.
Yes.
And I'm so appreciative because I've read stories over the years of seizures that were not well managed, and people have passed on from that. And so
Absolutely.
I will read, I will weigh the risks before I do give it to him. And I also, honestly, prayer to me is like adjunct medicine. I don't do it without being prayerful about it. And so I feel like use all those approaches,
Yeah. And then you
and
pray about
I'm
it.
not exactly, and I'm not knocking natural medicine at all, but I feel like those
Mhm.
should be used in conjunction. And you need to actually at least listen and weigh the risks for everything before you embark on that. So I feel like within that environment, there have to be people educated so that parents know what their options are. They actually recognize those things that are an issue so that kids can start to be helped sooner rather than later when all of the neurons have fused and
Yeah.
it's just
It's much
difficult to
too
help.
late. Yeah.
Absolutely. I also feel parents need to first of all be kind themselves as human beings and then teach your children kindness, because a lot of special needs children um, also encounter a lot of stigma. Let's say where you get into school or you have friends, you very quickly realize that you're not like everybody.
Yes.
And kids can be
They'll
brutal,
make you realize you're not like everybody.
Exactly. Kids can be brutal. And some
Absolutely.
of those things you can't really take away from kids. But when you start to teach them that not everybody is like you, because a disability, let's think about it. We talk about tolerance, religious tolerance, we talk about racial tolerance and all of that. We need to also talk about, the disabilities part of it. Not everybody is like you. And you will have friends who are different from you, and you should not treat them as outcasts, right? You should actually draw them close. But a lot of times, kids will reflect things that, they have seen in their parents. So as parents, we need to teach our children kindness and tolerance. I really do believe that, and where you can, learn about other people, because it's almost like when disability does not affect you, it's we versus them kind of
Them.
thing.
Yes. We need to be
Uh,
over that.
exactly, but you never know where it's going to affect you. So for instance, the law says that a new building should not be approved, the plans for it, except it's actually met a design where it also allows for people
Mobility
with
for,
disability.
yes, for persons
Exactly,
with disability.
exactly,
That could be a ramp or
exactly,
wider doors.
exactly,
Absolutely. But that's this
exactly.
part of the
So
world, though.
no, in the law in
The law
Nigeria,
in Nigeria,
actually, it says that
do
on
they do
paper.
it?
Exactly my point. So now, if you're a person in authority who can actually enforce those things, but you don't, what if tomorrow you or your child actually needs that building, which you approved and you
Mm-hmm.
didn't, because at
Mm-hmm.
that time you were a part of them, and now you become a part of
And now
we.
you're not part of us. That's
You know,
right.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
So we need to kind of, where we can, and we have authority, make sure that you're using your authority for good. Because I look at disabilities rights as human rights and
It
also a
is.
social justice issue,
It is.
so
100%.
we need to, as people who have authority over certain things, whether it's that you have a platform and you can speak on it, even if you're not the person approving the plans, if you're the person approving BRT buses in Lagos, for instance, to be bought, make sure that those buses, you don't just approve them because it's going to line your pockets or whatever, but it actually is going to provide for people with disabilities, right? We should, as a people, just start to think about those things because you never know tomorrow. And even if you're one of the forfeits, because globally, I believe the figures are that 1 person in 5 over their lifetime will have a disability. Even if you're not a part
Yeah.
of, if you're the forfeits that you never encounter a disability, for instance, it doesn't matter, just do it because that is the right thing to do, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so there are a lot
Absolutely.
of ways, there are a lot of ways that we can, in very little ways, advocate for people, who are living with disabilities, and don't look down on anyone like they're less than because the person has a disability. It's not something that they necessarily put their minds to. I'm sure, as much as and I speak personally, um, I wouldn't, if you asked me whether if I woke up, I would pick having a disability, I would not.
No,
It's
I
a
don't think
harder life
anybody
to live.
would. I don't think
Right.
anybody, if we're being
You,
honest,
you know,
nobody will pick that.
would I have picked that for my
Of
son?
course not.
Definitely not. As a
Yes.
mom who was expecting and as a mom who it took so long, infertility is another, a totally different issue, but that was not my expectation. But
Of
when that
course.
happens to you, you quickly adjust and you recognize, that in my instance, I'm like, oh no, you don't. You're not going to treat us less than, you're not going to make us feel any kind of way,
Yes.
we, with the right supports, we can still be just as functional. We can be just, contribute as much to society. And so it's just something that I'm so passionate about speaking
Yeah,
up for.
we can hear your passion. We can see your passion. Thank you so much, Amaka. You already got
You're
into my
welcome.
next point, which is talking about
Mhm.
after addressing parents and individuals, which you've done so eloquently. My biggest takeaway from that point is just to be kind. And anyone
Mhm.
who's visited my social media, they know this is my mantra. I talk about being
Mhm.
right and kind, but the two have
Mhm.
to go hand in hand because sometimes being right is
Absolutely.
not being kind. So if
Absolutely.
parents can first be kind to our kids, I think
Mhm.
whether your kid is different or not, you would take
Yep.
extra care to be kind to that special one and maybe even
Absolutely.
extend more kindness to them versus your other kids. I think this is
Absolutely.
huge and this is key because if they receive that kindness at home, when they go to school or elsewhere and maybe life is not so easy, at least when they come home, there's refuge there, there's solace there, there's comfort there. And I hope that our
Absolutely.
parents listening today have taken something a way that they can use to support your family or somebody around them, or they can use to just educate people by being a voice. The next thing
Absolutely.
that I wanted to talk about is how you think organizations and governments can help, but you've already done that. So you said making sure that we implement the act. So there's the new
Mhm.
Disability Act, the new disability law in Nigeria. So, or wherever you are, we are Nigerians, wherever you are, if you're in that position of authority, make sure that you are implementing. Don't cut corners because you're like, don't, I'm not going to waste that money,
Right.
to put
Exactly.
that ramp over
Exactly.
there or that big door over there.
Yep.
So
Yep.
do
Yep. And
that.
yeah, I also want to speak on employing individuals with disabilities.
Yes,
There's a
please.
certain percentage, I can't remember what percentage it is. And this I know is within the government at least, that is supposed to be reserved for individuals who have disabilities. To the
Oh,
best
I
of
didn't
my
know
knowledge,
that.
yes,
Wow,
that act actually
that's
has that
awesome.
provision. On paper it is. On paper it's awesome. But we all know what the employment stats in Nigeria say. It's not
It's
it's
not
not a
pretty.
great
No.
Exactly. And so now reserving a portion of it for people with disabilities, obviously, we know is a tall act. Now, for the private sector, we've actually tried to find placements for certain people who have disabilities, and it's been difficult. You know, speaking with friends who work within organizations and, you know, kind of own businesses, we've tried to place people within that, and it's just it's almost impossible. You know, they tell you, oh, it's great, it's great, it's great, but unfortunately we're just not set up to accommodate the needs, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera. But you know, the truth is I've never even had any of them ask us how they can actually set up, because there's some things that you can do which
There's
are
some
very
things you can
minor
do.
and really
Yes.
it doesn't even cost that much to do that. If you know, it's just if you're accommodating a new employee, period, you're going to make the space, you're going to, so if you're already doing it, what you can do is just the dimensions are different. Maybe it's an software upgrade, but a lot of things, you know, a lot of tech gadgets actually accommodate already for people who have disabilities. So just
Absolutely.
ask, you know, ask. And when you ask, we can guide you in the right direction, but we don't even get those questions typically. So that's one area that we would also like to do work in, to advocate, you know, and also hopefully help companies to get to the place where, you know, they're looking at those things when they want to employ, and don't automatically discredit a person because they have a disability, particularly where you can see the disability immediately.
We
Let's
need to
start to
give,
look past
yes,
those
we need to
things.
give
Yes,
opportunities equally and across the
abs-
board. And if you don't know, like if you're
absolutely.
listening to this podcast, you know, like Amaka just said, contact the Green Onyx Foundation and they can educate you. And don't
Yeah,
think that it's, like she said, it's too expensive, it's going to cost a lot of money. It just might not. It might be something that you already have within your space, within
absolutely.
your organization. So by the time you speak to an expert such as Amaka and her co-founder, Ijoma, then they can educate you on some of the things that you can do. And I
Absolutely.
think that is so important. I'm sure there are organizations, other organizations such as yourself out there. So we
Hmm.
need to just go out there, do some research and ask the questions and give the opportunities.
Absolutely.
So tell
Absolutely.
me, where you, some of the things that you're not doing right now within your organization, however, you have a vision to do it. So tell us a little bit more about that and perhaps where you see yourself and your organization in the next 5 to 10 years.
Awesome, awesome. I think one of the things is what we just spoke about. Informally, we've tried to place people within organizations to find them jobs. I think that's one area that we would love
That's a much
to
needed area,
do.
Maka. That's a much
Yep,
needed area.
yeah, yeah. We're hoping to do more, even within the next year. And some of that
Okay.
we have various we take like a multi-pronged approach, but the first place that we typically will start is putting out information. So
Okay.
creating informational videos that people can at least sort of, you know, ginger their thought process. Well,
Mhm.
maybe this is something, because people need to hear things a few times in a few different ways before it actually takes root within their consciousness. So that's where we typically will start putting out that information. We have someone on our board who is a registered nurse and is well versed in taking care of people with special needs. And so we're having her start to lead an initiative that we have with parents where, you know, there's a certain age that we start to catch them, to give information and, you know, kind of give like a toolkit as to how they navigate with their children who have special needs. We also have a person on our board who is a special needs educator like IJ, and she will sort of head some of the work that we're doing in starting to make sure that their goals within a child's education plan In this part of the world, it's either called an IPP, I believe, in the US. In Canada, we call it the IEP. And I'm quite familiar with that as a parent. But
Yes.
as a parent, I know how heartbreaking it is for me not, for one thing, when we started the process, I didn't really understand the hand in hand that needed to happen with my child's educators. Every time I sat down at the meeting as a parent, all I would hear is them telling me, your child cannot do this and your child cannot do that. So it took,
That would
it took
just
a
be rough. All the negatives,
it's really
rough.
really tough as a parent. But then when I started to, and I really am grateful for the support that I have, because sometimes I'll go vent about it to friends, for instance. But fortunately for me, I've had friends who are either lawyers who have sat, within the family law system, and they've kind of been privy to these things, or in social work, or even educators. And they're like, no, don't look at it that way. You need to understand XYZ so that you push back on certain things. If your child is doing something at home, they're not doing it in school, you need to work with the educator to kind of explain to them what you're doing at home so that you're doing the same thing in the school system and at home. So we're going to hopefully start to work with educators in the Nigerian space more closely to kind of start to establish those things that we see work here. And it's not exporting Western practices. These are things that work.
Yes,
When
absolutely.
I've worked as a program manager, managing donor funds, and every donor agency will need to see impact. And for you to measure impact, you need to have goals, you need to have
Yeah, they need to
targets,
know
et
where your
cetera, et
money is
cetera.
going. Nothing wrong with that,
Exactly.
so they can keep giving.
Ex-
We need to be
ex- ex-
accountable.
Exactly. So it's just, enforcing, or it's just putting a system in place so that whatever energy you're expending, even as an educator, you want to know that your student has moved from point A to
Absolutely.
point B, and here it's more a function of this is what legally is required. So I've talked about this act, it's very broad, it really doesn't have teeth, right? And I'm not an advocate of always, this our government, they don't do it. There are things that even if the government doesn't do it,
What have you
you're a
done?
private, exactly, and that's where we're coming from. Let's do something, let's do it together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's start to enforce these things. The government will catch up,
It
whatever,
will
and if they
catch
don't
up.
even, if they
Absolutely.
don't catch up, whatever, but where we can. And we're not naive to think that every primary school or every secondary school within the nation, we're handpicking a few where we know we can at least do pilots, and those will work over time. And then gradually, others will start to pick up these things as a matter of daily business. It will become natural that people have seen this work, and
Mhm.
hopefully there are bodies that will spring up that will start to kind of monitor these things, et cetera, et cetera. But there are some things we know we can't control, but there are other things that we know that once we start to do the work, it will catch on.
It will catch up. Yeah. And it will fall in place as well.
Yes,
So right
yes.
now, Green, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I believe that the organizations that will go get on board with these things will be the easier ones when implementing partners want to go into the country to do work. When they see that, organizations have these things in place and have their ducks in a row, then it makes it easier to actually make you a steward of funds or of some capacity building initiative that they can give to make you better. Once you
Yes.
have these ducks in a row, then it just makes it easier because the knowledge is there. They see that you've done the work. It's easier to demonstrate your experience and expertise. So we're really hoping, to work in a number of areas, be it education, healthcare, of course, advocacy with the government, because we're not anti-government. We
No,
understand there's
we're
issues,
all allies to support our people,
exactly,
so we can't be working against
exactly,
the government because that's who we
exactly,
need to move this forward,
absolutely,
right? As well.
absolutely,
So, with regard
absolutely.
to working hand in hand with the government, and I know that you
Mhm.
are founded and registered in the U.S., and a lot of
Mhm.
your work is in Nigeria. Are you also working to be in other countries as well?
So we're currently working on incorporation in Nigeria, or registering as an NGO in Nigeria.
Okay.
We're hoping that once we are up and running within the next year and a half, and when I say up and running, we're already working there, but we've implemented a few pilots and can take results.
Okay.
We're hoping that next stop will be Ghana. We're
Nice.
also hoping, yes, we're hoping to, kind of have a couple of countries where we implement pilots. And once it starts to work, then we will start to move further out in Africa to do work. But if there are opportunities that come up within the next year that are workable for us in other, we're always on the lookout as to how we can make
Absolutely.
impact,
Yes.
because it's not a Nigeria focused initiative, it's an Africa wide focused initiative. We might just take a small chunk in another country because operation wise we're not, we'll be too stretched out. So if we can take up a couple of initiatives where we might not have a full scale operation in another African country, we would do that. And kind of test the waters and see
As
what
well.
works there, what
Mhm.
doesn't work, etc. Just start to gain knowledge on the ground.
Okay. And just curious if there's any question that you would like to answer that I didn't ask. So is there any question at all that you wanted me to ask that I didn't get
So
to?
you did ask the question, but I did not answer it. And you
Oh,
asked about our name, Green Onyx Foundation,
yes. Oh,
as well as
yes.
our logo. Yes. So the Green Onyx is, it's a gemstone that stands for resilience. It
Oh,
kind of gives off the energy to have mental fortitude to make decisions in tough situations. So we loved that gemstone for that very fact. I love gemstones. IG as well love the name. And so if you look at our logo, it
mhm.
has a seedling within the gemstone.
Yes, it
And
does.
it's a very unlikely place for you to find growth, right? Within a gemstone. But that's the way we view individuals who have disabilities. Oftentimes, we're not looked at as gems, right? It's kind of like,
Mm.
this is wasteland, or this is,
No
ah,
potential.
exactly. Let we that, we have body, we can
Gago.
work.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know
Let's
what you
work.
mean.
So step aside, but
Yeah,
every human, disability or not, is a gem, and we feel that
absolutely.
with the right nurturing, beauty can grow in the unlikeliest places. And so that's kind of what, our logo stands for. We see potential where others
Huge potential. Yes.
don't see any growth. And so that's why you see that seedling
Thank you
within the
so much.
gemstone.
Yeah, thank you so much for answering that. So we are close to the end of our conversation today. What I would like you to do is just give us one advice. So anyone listening to our conversation today or watching the video, what is one takeaway that you would like them to take with them?
I would like for people to know that disability rights is human rights. Nobody really owns the rights to live in a good life. And so you need to make room for others. It's not them versus us. That
Us.
is not,
Yeah.
it's we're all in this together. We're all in this together. And another thing that I usually tell people is that people with disabilities are so varied. It is not one size fits all. Do not paint everybody with brush strokes.
Thank you so
Treat
much.
everybody, treat everybody with respect. Ask how the person wants to be addressed. Some people like to be termed as deaf, some people hard of hearing.
Absolutely.
Ask
Or hearing
when you're in
loss,
doubt.
yeah, 100%.
Absolutely. When you're in doubt, ask the person how they would want to be addressed. But
Okay.
above all, treat everybody with respect. I really appreciate this platform, IJ. I'm thankful to have been here.
It has been amazing talking to you, Amaka. Thank you so much. I have learned so much, and I'm really hoping that our listeners will have learned something that they can use to work on themselves, work on people around them, or just share with other people so that they can be educated as well, and so that we can continue this conversation. I think the more we talk about this, the more we hear people out, the better we can be kind and loving together. Like you said, disability rights is human rights. So let's do more to support persons with special needs. So thank you so much, Amaka, for being here
Absolutely.
today.
Thank you, IJ. I appreciate it.